Hey guys, what's up? This is Campo and welcome back to my channel. So on today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the top 10 2020 champions, the champs that were released in the past year. Anyone from the arena or the event quest. I'm not counting the trophy champions. And yeah, this was a difficult list to put together, to be honest, because there's so many good champions. There aren't too many completely overpowered champions. But a lot of them really do have some meta countering abilities and some new utility and mechanics that we've never seen before. So it really was an interesting thing for me to come up with this list and try to argue why I put them in this order. And as a disclaimer, this is of course my opinion, but I do want you to know that if I don't have the champion myself, I did talk to people that have them and asked them to convince me why they thought that champion was good. And I did look at a lot of gameplay and test out the champions that I do have. So I do think that there is a fair amount of research that went into this, and I would definitely be interested to hear your opinion as well. So let's get started. We're going to do all 10, and then I also have 4 honorable mentions that I'll go over quickly at the end. So if your champion doesn't show up, don't worry. I probably have them in the honorable mentions, and if not, I'm very sorry. So anyway, number 10, we've got LONGSHOT. Now, when LONGSHOT came out, he was super flashy. You know, you just throw heavy attacks, you throw the special 2, and they pretty much melt. Even if they don't have buffs, he still works pretty well and has above average damage. And, you know, I think we have a lot of mystics that have high damage against buff champions. But the one thing that he does differently is that he does have a little bit of upside in the Abyss of Legends. Because not only can he take on the cosmic champions there, but I do believe that he can be a clearer on some of the fights that Aegon does, just because his damage per hit is pretty high. And the damage cap doesn't really stop his big L2s from happening. And there are other champions that have buffs, like Red Skull and Aegon and stuff like that. So a lot of people competed for this number 10 spot. And LONGSHOT certainly has the damage and the fun factor. He does compete against a lot of good mystics, but the one thing that I think separates him from some of the other champions that were competing for this spot is that he can also do Abyss of Legends. So that's why I give LONGSHOT number 10. Coming in at number 9 is Immortal Abomination. Now, we haven't seen too much from this guy yet. I don't know many people that like put up huge grinds for him, but we do have someone in our alliance with him. And I have seen some gameplay, and it's convinced me that he does deserve this spot. He's very unique. He feels like a big tanky science champion with lots of debuffs. He's poison immune. And one of his main things is that he inflicts poisons, which puts him in that rare category of champions that can go against acid wash. So right away, he is sort of like overnight became the best acid wash counter in the game. But in addition to that, in longer fights, he can really ramp up some crazy damage. You basically try to get to like 4 of the toxic auras, and then you throw a special 3 and you get this really long acid burn, and then you start doing some like insane burst damage. I think the only reason that he doesn't make it a little higher on the list is he requires a very aggressive play style. And if the AI isn't throwing specials, then you only get like a small window of opportunity to get in when you have the acid burn. And because of that, you know, sometimes you really miss your big damage. But the bottom line is he can reverse healing like so many other science champions do. He can stack poisons, and he's super tanky. With all the debuffs and the weakness debuff that he also puts on them, he can really take a hit. So even if you aren't playing him with the ideal rotation, he's probably going to get the job done, kind of like how King Groot or Man-Thing or one of those big tanky champions usually gets it done, even if it's a little slower. But unlike those other tanky champions, he does have potential for super high damage and longer fights. And I do think also on defense, he's going to have an impact in the next year. So a lot of people haven't seen him yet, but I do believe that Immortal Abomination deserves his spot in the top 10. All right, at number 8, we have Red Goblin. And believe me, I know a lot of people don't rate him this high, but I do have a lot of experience with this guy. I grinded for him, awakened him, took him to rank 5, and he has a ton of utility, a ton of block proficiency, and is a really cool character. At bottom line, he can inflict incinerate. He's incinerate immune. He has lots of debuffs. He has power control. He has buffs. and he has armor break, and he can counter Spider-Man evade. So like right there are so many combinations of nodes and tricky matchups that he can just like totally take on. And I will link in the description a full review I did of him with some pretty tricky Act 6 fights that he just walked all over. And I will say the one thing people complain about is that he takes a while to ramp up. Like he's not doing that much damage in the beginning of the fight. But if you think about it, all you got to do is throw one special 1 and one special 3, and then you're there for the rest of the fight. They just melt the rest of the way. And you know what? Like there's so many other champions that have rotations like that, you know, like Dr. Doom, Silver Surfer, and even someone like Namor, where you got to get off those back-to-back special 3s. So it's not unheard of to have a champion that needs to get off a couple special attacks first. And like, to me, it's not much of a downside because he does have the high block proficiency. It's one of the highest in the game. And because of that damage and utility that he brings, I really do think that he is an excellent character. All right, so now we're on to number 7, and we're going to go to another Mystic champion, and that is Sorcerer Supreme. So Sorcerer Supreme is really interesting because unlike the other sort of like passive power gain Doctor Strange type characters, she's a lot more customizable and has a lot more unique utility that other Mystics don't. Like the armor break and the ability to slow the opponent and regen on the block are just sort of the examples that I know. I don't have her, but I know that she is pretty beloved in the community as a utility champ, just for what she brings to the table. I will say I'm not too sure of scenarios where a Mystic is going to need a slow debuff. Like often if it's a slow type matchup, there are better champions to use. But just the fact that she has all that utility, and on top of it, you can customize it with her pre-fight ability. You can choose what stance you want to start in, which is unique to her. And additionally, if you throw a special 3, you can get it permanently for the whole fight. It really makes her like a very easy to use champion and very customizable, which I really respect. And yeah, that regeneration on the block is unlike anything else in the game. It makes her super sustainable. And, you know, some people bring her to war. Some people use her in questing. I do think that she is sort of a utility machine when it comes to Mystics, on top of all the stuff that you want your normal Mystics to do, like nullify and get the power gain and things like that. So yeah, she's a very, very good champion. She didn't make it higher in the list because there are some champions I think that are better, but I do think we're getting to the point of the list where we're really getting into the meat of it with some very, very good champions. All right, so number 6 is next, and we're going to go to one of the mutants, and it's PROFESSORX. Now, PROFESSORX, before you get into anything, is probably one of the best evade and miss counters in the entire game. Simply, you just get off a couple heavy attacks, or you wait for your falter debuff or the falter passive to show up, and you just like hold heavy, and all you have to do is get to 25 of his charges, and you're good for the rest of the matchup. So there aren't many champions that can say that, where like it's just completely turned off, all the evade and miss, and you can just play normally and not have to worry about any of that. That is super cool. Additionally, he has some ridiculous synergies for the other mutants. Like Emma Frost has almost a guaranteed crit on her special 2. You can, you know, deal with poisons that you get on you with reducing the damage from that, so you can run suicides. Special attack damage going up and up when you build him up and apply it to the other champions. So, you know, he is definitely an enhancement to your mutant teams when you use them. And on top of that, he has a pretty interesting play style himself where he builds his own prowesses and can spam specials for some pretty high damage. I do think he suffers from 2 things. One of them is that his synergies generally don't apply to himself. So all those wonderful benefits that the other mutants are getting, he doesn't get. And you have to win a few fights with him first for them to really stack up. So it's a little impractical to like go into a quest and win, you know, a few fights, like 3 or 4 fights with PROFESSORX, so that you get max Cerebro charges, and then, you know, your synergies are that much better. However, I'm sure there will be a scenario where that comes in handy, and he can really hold his own as a good champion himself. His other downside, it's kind of like the sunspot problem, where like in order to build up his maximum prowess, it takes a lot of like finicky playing. And, you know, in a very long matchup, you can totally do it and get like tons of prowess and just get this insane damage. But on your day-to-day fights, I think it's more practical to play him a little more conservatively and just build a few prowess, throw a special 3, start chaining your special 2s together, and you're still going to do like very, very good damage. It's just hold your expectations. When you see those gigantic numbers on some of the videos of him, like, you're probably not going to be playing him that way. But yeah, he is a very, very good champion, and I do rate him in the top 6. All right, so now we're getting to the top 5. And in my opinion, we have one of every class except for skill, because I didn't think there were very many good skill champions this year. And sorry to anyone that offends. But there is, for the remaining 5 classes, I have one per class here, and I do think that these are the best 5, and the order is definitely in debate. It kind of depends on like what you need to do when, but I do think I put them in kind of an order of like most powerful to 5th most powerful. So we're going to start with number 5, and I put Red Guardian there. Now, I have a SIG 200 Red Guardian, and I use him in Alliance War. I use him in questing. He has such a unique utility. Before you get into any of his other abilities, the fact that he doesn't ever get buffs is so good, because for so much of the history of the game, you know, players were taking off Dexterity Mastery so that they could deal with stuff. But like, let's say you're facing Dormammu and you take off Dexterity and he gets the special 2, you're not able to evade that special 2 anymore, and you just have to like block it. Whereas Red Guardian still has the evade ability, but he just doesn't proc the buff. And it comes in handy mostly against MOJO, also against Dormammu, but also in stuff like Buffet and Power Snack and Spite and Pilfer and Prey on the Weak. You know, anything where it's like, if there's some kind of buffs going, you get screwed, he's your go-to guy. And I do use him quite often on Path 1 in Alliance War, which has the, you know, all those like buffet nodes with Lionheart and some of the traditional heal blockers that require debuffs. It doesn't matter, because with buffet, he'll never proc anything. On top of that, he has a really big special 2. He has slow debuff, and he has a crazy perfect block. I mean, you can essentially parry perfectly for the entire match. And often if you take a hit to block, it will be a perfect block. And the higher SIG he is, the more sustainable your charges are. So you can get off a really, really big special 2, which is really cool. And he is very similar to Captain America Infinity War, but he does fill some of the gaps that Cap can't do. Like he has the direct red damage when he gets that debuff on them, which I'm forgetting the name of the debuff. But when you throw a big special 2, not all of it relies on one big hit critting. You have multiple hits and red direct damage. Additionally, slow can deal with passive unstoppable like Cap can't. And, you know, if you're fighting a MOJO, I would much rather have Red Guardian than Cap. So while Cap is a better champion overall, Red Guardian really fits some niche utility. And I've seen some crazy things. I've done some crazy things, and he's been super reliable for me, even in incursions. And yeah, I love Red Guardian. All right, number 4, we have Cosmic Ghost Rider. And yeah, I know a lot of people probably put him even higher, but let me explain why. First of all, like I said, he's, you know, these top 5 are like so good. They're all almost interchangeable. But here's the thing with Cosmic Ghost Rider. I look at him as a Cull Obsidian that should have been. It's like the crazy damage numbers, but he also has immunities and really insane block proficiency. One of the highest in the game besides like Captain America Infinity War, basically. And yeah, his damage numbers are just absolutely ridiculous. Giant crits. And he does have bleed and incinerate immunity, and he's relatively easy to play. There aren't too many matchups where you're not able to get off his ideal rotation. But of course, if you can't proc buffs for one reason or another, or you can't throw special attacks, you get a little screwed. But in general, you know, he's just gonna roll through content, especially if you have like a 6-star rank 3. I do think like his only downfall is that he doesn't really have a lot of other utility. The only one that I've really seen in practice is that massive armor break that he gets against villains, which is like a huge Killmonger counter. So like that is big. Like we need more Killmonger counters for sure. And you don't have to do anything. Like it's just there for the entire match. So that is quite nice. But like, you know, the power locking and the other stuff that he gets, I don't think you're going to use him for utility. You're going to use him for damage. And because of that, he's not like super meta countering, but you just have to respect the immunities, the sustainability, and the fact that he gets buffs and that he has crazy damage and that he's going to just like roll through a lot of Act 7. So yeah, he's definitely a top 5 champ, arguably a little bit higher. But because I think there's a little bit missing in the utility department, I think that he is going to stay at number 4 for now. All right, guys, well, we have made it to the top 3, and coming in squarely at number 3 is TIGRA. Now, TIGRA has just tons of upside, and I think she's only going to become more popular as more people see videos of her and learn to use her. But the thing with TIGRA is she's very similar to Quake and Ghost in that there's a big learning curve, and a lot of people won't even attempt to try it. But if you do try it, you will find that it definitely has some big returns, and you'll be able to counter some of the worst nodes in the game with her with incredibly high DPS and the ability to just completely control the matchup. No buffs, no abilities, just punish the specials, counter with your heavy attack and your special. She has unblockable specials and is able to miss projectiles. It's pretty incredible when you see some of the videos. I think the 2 most meta countering fights that she has right now is the Apocalypse boss in current Alliance quest, and also Thing on the Stubborn tactic, because she can shut down his Unstoppable and basically just bait his special ones and punish them and control the fight the entire time, and he goes down very, very quickly. So those are just 2 examples, but we're seeing more and more her ability to just like take no damage in a fight. And her only limitations are if there's some kind of evade or there's certain debuffs that turn off her abilities, or certainly she doesn't have any immunities. But, you know, kind of like Quake and Ghost, there are some scenarios where they're not the best, but more often there's going to be a scenario where if you enjoy playing her, you can bring her in and she's going to be able to take care of entire lanes or problematic fights for you. The other thing I will mention is that Quake was released in 2016, and it took years before she became mainstream as one of the best champions in the game. And I will say that TIGRA's following is already quite large. I'm in a chat where a lot of people understand her upside and are learning to use her and starting to counter some of the difficult Alliance War nodes with her. And I do think that she's catching on quickly and that soon there will be a lot more people using her. So I'm very excited for the future of TIGRA, and perhaps she's not going to be like a lane clearing go-to champion like Cosmic Ghost Rider can be, but I do think that she edges him out just a little bit in the number 3 spot because she is definitely the most meta shattering champion of the year in her ability to deal with stubborn wars and the Apocalypse boss and so much more. So I'm looking forward to seeing more from TIGRA. I'm currently learning her myself. Hopefully one day I will completely solo the Apocalypse boss and I'll put the video up on my channel, but I do think she's a fantastic champion. She engages the opponent. It feels like you're fighting them and you're just like getting so many hits in. And if you look at the video playback of her, it's actually just beautiful. All her animations and the way they go together, and she's just like flipping around and crouching. And I don't know, I just think that she is such a cool design. And because of that, she is going to make the top 3. Coming in at number 2 is Guardian, the tech champion. Now, I don't have him as a 5 or 6 star, so I had to talk to some hardcore Guardian players. And I will say originally I had him a little bit lower on the list because I didn't fully understand all of his abilities, but they were able to convince me that he deserved top 3. And when I compared him to TIGRA and the fact that he is a little bit easier to use and has more range as a champion, I decided to put him as number 2. He just has so much utility and access to pretty decent damage that I think he really deserves this spot. As the game is evolving, I think utility is becoming way more important, as well as sustainability, and he has both of those things. So I'm probably going to forget some stuff, but with his SIG ability, he has insane energy resistance. So things like shock debuffs and cold snap, he can just heal from them and not really take the damage. Additionally, magic limbo and critical failure from domino, so he becomes really good counters to magic and domino in those scenarios. So yeah, his high SIG, he's definitely one that you want to invest in, but when you get him there, he becomes super tanky. He has the armor up buff, which is good for Havoc, and there's other scenarios where you do want to have an armor, like the Cavalier quest for tech. I should also mention that 2 pieces of utility that he has that are my favorite are the ability to parry all projectiles. The dude can just parry everything. And also he has a great synergy that he brings onto the team that increases the block proficiency of everybody else on the team. So for champs like Cull Obsidian or other champs that have lower block proficiency or need to parry a lot, that can really make a huge difference. Additionally, he does have a little bit of power control. He doesn't crit, so in some ways he's an even better version of Guillotine 2099. You can kind of go crazy and throw a special 3 back to back and then throw a giant special 2. And yeah, I just think that everything he does is just so easy to use, and it's sort of like kind of like how Iron Man Infinity War like has all these crazy abilities for that you want from a tech champion to counter, but he also has like sort of the more meta countering version of all those abilities, is super tanky and has good damage unto himself. So he's a very worthwhile investment. Even unduped, he still has all that utility, but when you get him to SIG 200 and he can take on those energy resistance matchups, he becomes even better, and it's because of that full potential that we're going to put Guardian at number 2. And finally, at number 1, I think you can guess who this is going to be. And I tried to not be a cliche and put this guy number 1 like everyone else is, but I kind of had to, and that is Apocalypse. And it's because of the sheer impact that this guy is having on the contest. And I won't go too long on him because I feel like there's already a million videos on him. But what it comes down to is he is a super solid champ unto himself. Like if he had none of his synergies or horseman abilities, he would probably still make the top 10 in my book. Because he has like immunities that come on pretty quickly and last for the whole quest. He's anti-evade. He has access to debuffs like weakness, including like there's not too many champions that can have weakness. He has a fairly easy rotation where you just throw specials in a certain order and then he starts hitting pretty hard. So yeah, he's got a lot of things that you would want. But then when you look at his synergies for Cable and Storm and Gambit and Wolverine, it's just absolutely insane what he does to those champions, many of them being older champions that needed big buffs. He also, with his SIG ability, can regen while other champs are being used, so you can bring him back for a boss fight after you put him on the bench for a couple fights. And additionally, the ability to turn the mutants into horsemen. There's been some crazy like Horseman Cable and Archangel gameplay and so many of those other champions in the mutant class that can be turned into horsemen. It's pretty outrageous, guys. So, and on top of that, he's a really difficult defender and the current AQ boss. So we're going to be seeing a lot of Apocalypse. And yeah, I think if you look at the totality of what he brings and the impact and like desirability this guy has in the contest, I think you'll understand why I'm putting him as number 1 as the best champion of the year when you consider all the factors. And that is certainly something many other would agree with. But in my personal opinion, he also deserves that spot. So finally, we're going to go over the honorable mentions, and it was kind of sad that none of the skill champions made it onto this list. And so in no particular order, my honorable mentions were Hitmonkey, Black Widow Deadly Origin, MOJO, and Spider-Ham. And listen, I understand there's a lot of hardcore Hitmonkey fans, and there's no question he hits hard. He does have access to those crits on demand. He has the bleed. He has anti-evade. He has anti-shrug, or I mean, he shrugs debuffs. And like, that's all really good. It's what you want in a skill champion. And I rate him like definitely top 5 skill champions, but that class is so lagging behind. And the fact that I just haven't seen a lot of gameplay of Hitmonkey being used in like Alliance War or Alliance Quest or some of the harder content, you know, he mostly sits on defense and gets kills there and is super fun to play and has high damage. But when I was looking at like the bottom, like 7, 8, 9, 10 champions like Red Goblin and Abomination and Longshot, it was like I've just seen them being used in endgame content and they have like meta countering abilities, whereas Hitmonkey is just like a really good skill champion. So he's definitely awesome. Like I think he could have made the top 10 list, but sort of like the utility that he brings is sort of like what I want to see baseline for a skill champion, and his damage is very high and he's a good defender. That's great, but it's just not quite enough to make the top 10. MOJO is a similar story, and he needs basically SIG 200 or really high SIG to get off that crazy degeneration and the damage. He's definitely like a terrible defender. He's one of the worst champs to fight in the game, especially if you don't have Red Guardian. But when I think of the other champions like Red Guardian and Guardian who need the high SIG level, I feel comfortable giving them generic stones, but given how stacked the Mystic class is, I just don't see myself feeding MOJO all my resources, because I'm sure like how often I'm going to actually use him, if you know what I mean. So yeah, I should be rating him based on his full potential at SIG 200 when he hits crazy and has all that degeneration. And you also have to acknowledge that he's like a toxic defender, but at the same time, I don't see him being in the same level as even LONGSHOT or the other Mystics that I put in that top 10. We also have Spider-Ham, who I think simply we just haven't seen enough of. He seems slightly impractical, yet really well designed and fun, and can do some crazy power stings and other stuff. But I haven't been convinced yet that he's going to irk out any of these top 10. Eke it out into the, I don't know why I said irk, eke out into the top 10. But he is very good design, like great way to end the year. And I do think that he's really fun, and maybe we will see more from him and he'll make it. And finally, Black Widow, Deadly Origins, probably at the bottom of this list. She has high damage. She has access to shock. But she is one of those champions where like she kind of reminds me of Void in one aspect, which is like Void has utility on his other special attacks, but the way to play Void is spam special 1. It's the most damage, it's the most utility, it's the best way to keep up Fear of the Void. And Black Widow's the same way with her special 2. Like the best way to play her is to intercept and get those like Widow charges and then throw special 2. It's just going to do the most damage. In a longer fight, you can throw a special 3 first, but the entire sabotage mechanic with her ability reduction that she has is just very impractical, and I haven't seen it make a big enough impact. Maybe there will be matchups against Science champions where she's reducing these abilities and doing all this direct damage and it works, but I haven't really seen it yet. And I've found like when I've experimented with my rank 5 Black Widow, it's just better to spam the special 2 and get that big damage. But she does make an honorable mention because she is one of the best champs to use in the Cavalier quest for skill champions. All of those debuffs are constantly expiring, and she gets all these passive furies and usually one special 2 and they're dead. So because I use her every single month to clear that quest very quickly, she definitely deserves an honorable mention. And she is beloved by a lot of people in this game, and I think she is like a very fun champion, and like her animations are really cool as well. So that's going to wrap it up for today, guys. Thanks for listening to me talk for this whole time. And I would love to hear your opinion, and, you know, feel free to send me gameplay and opinions as well, so that we can further formulate, you know, what we think of these 2020 champions and where they all rank this year. So thanks for checking it out, and I will catch you guys in the next one.